Hey everybody, welcome to HomeRecordingMadeEasy.com and here on my YouTube channel. In this video, I want to show you how I have now set up my hardware within Studio One. I want to show you the routing of how it all gets routed, how all the cables get connected between the hardware and my audio interface, and then how I set up the plugin Pipeline XT with Studio One to run all the hardware so I don't need to use print tracks and anything like that. So if you're into hybrid mixing and you're into how this all this stuff kind of hooks up and kind of works, this video is for you. So as you can see here, maybe over my shoulder, I have my iPhone here kind of just recording my rack, my setup here. I'll put some video up on the screen and I'm going to take you through that. So the way I have this set up is that I set up my hardware in predetermined chains, if you will, meaning on my mix bus, I have a chain of hardware with some tape emulation and some mix bus compression. On my drum bus, I have a stereo drum bus compressor, and we'll talk about all this in a second. And then I also have a mono channel of a Neve 1073 preamp with a Neve 1073 EQ, as well as a 2264 compressor. So I really have three separate chains, and the way I've kind of set my system up is that these things are dedicated to specific things. So I have a mix bus dedicated set chain, a drum bus dedicated chain, and then a mono chain that I would typically use on vocals and whatnot. So let me show you. So before we jump here into Studio One and show you the I/O and how all that kind of works, I want to show you a diagram of how it kind of is hooked up, as opposed to going behind the rack and showing you a rat nest of wires. It really wouldn't work. So the first diagram I want to show you here, and hopefully you'll be able to see this okay. And again, it looks a little bit more confusing than it really truly is. It really isn't that difficult to do this. So this first diagram is the output of the hardware. Or if, as a matter of fact, let me show you the input side of this first. The input side would probably be a little easier. So the output of our audio interface into the hardware and how all the cables are kind of hooked up. So for my interface, I'm using a Universal Audio Apollo X6 interface. Now this interface has, and you can see here on the top, two mic line inputs. One of those inputs, input one is what I'm using for my vocal mic now. And then it also has six line inputs, 1/4 inch TRS balance line inputs, as you can see up here. And then also 6 outputs, as well as 2 outputs that go to my studio speakers, which we'll talk about in a second. So the way this works is, our interface is on the top. My drum bus compressor, which is a Heritage Audio successor, stereo drum bus compressor, is on my drum bus. And you can see the picture of it here with the inputs and outputs underneath. And then underneath that, I have a Neve R10 500 series rack loaded up with some 500 series modules, which you'll be able to see the video if I put it up on the screen. And you'll see that I have my 2 Neve 542 compressors here, or excuse me, my tape emulation here, and there's 2 because there's mono, and this is on the stereo bus. And then I have a stereo TK Audio BC500 SSL style bus compressor. That's what's on my master bus. Okay, and what I don't show you in this video or on this slide is what I have over here, the Neve 1073. We're going to save that for another video. I want to try to keep this simple. Okay, so I have a mono chain here, as I spoke about in a second, and we'll talk about that in another video. Okay, so back to the diagram. So the way this works is you have to be able to route your audio out of Studio One in through the hardware and then back into Studio One. That's the way this kind of works. So the first thing I want to show you is, you can see here, let's start with the successor, or let's actually start with the master bus here. So you can see, hopefully, that output 5 and 6 here, the green lines here, okay, on here, the green lines over here, that is going to, output 5 is going to input 7 on my Neve 500 series chassis, because input 7 is the first 542 Neve tape emulation hardware, 500 series, okay? And then output 6 is going into input 8, because channel 8 is the second 542 Neve 500 series, okay? Because these are mono, so I need two of them if we're going to put them on a stereo bus. Okay, so that's the output. So output 5.6 on the Apollo, on the back of the Apollo, TRS cables, by the way, go to input 7 and input 8. Okay, now from there, you can see underneath here on the 500 series here, you can see that I have two orange lines here. This is so we could go from the Neves on the tape emulation to the next module on the 500 series, which is the SSL bus compressor by TK Audio. So you can see output 7, okay? We got input 7, output 7 is going into input 9, okay? Output 8 is going into input 10. 9 and 10 on the 500 series are linked together, so it kind of sees it as one because the TK Audio SSL bus compressor is a stereo unit. It's a 2-slot unit, okay? So the way we're going from the audio interface to the Neve for the stereo bus, for the mix bus, we're going out output 5 and 6 into input 7 and 8, out of 7 and 8 into 9 and 10. And then what you don't see here, and I'll show you on the next slide, is we go out. Once we go out 9 and 10 back into the Apollo, and I'll show you that on the next slide, okay? So this is just the outputs of the interface to the hardware. The inputs will be on the next slide. So that's for the mix bus. For the Heritage Audio, for the drum bus, we are going outputs 3 and 4, the red lines here, 3 and 4. 3 is going to the left input, 4 is going to the right output, okay? So I'm using 5 and 6 for the mix bus stuff, 3 and 4 for the drum bus, the Heritage Audio successor bus compressor. Now, over here, like I said, I have another green line. This is output 2, because it's mono, not stereo, going to input 1 on the Neve, and that is the Neve 1073 pre. Okay, you don't see that on the diagram here. And then from there, I'm going the output of output 1 into channel 2, the output of channel 2 into channel 3. That links these 3 first slots together. Okay, so we're going from a preamp to an EQ to a compressor. Okay, and then output 3 will go back into the interface. Again, I'll show you that on the next slide. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So I'll keep this up here for a second. You can kind of pause the video if you need to kind of print out this screen or take a screenshot or whatever you want to do if you're going to need this as a guide to help you. Okay, so it is kind of simple. A lot of cables for sure. And again, I'm using all Mogami Gold cables. Use high quality cables whenever you can. So that is the output of the interface to the input of the hardware. Okay, now after we do that, we have to go from the output of the hardware route it back into the input of the Apollo so we can hear it in Studio One, okay? So the first thing I want to show you here is you see my monitor outputs here on the output side. Those are going to my 2 speakers. You could just disregard those. So now we're going from the outputs back to the inputs. So let's start with the mix bus. So down here, outputs 9 and 10, okay, are going back in to inputs 5 and 6. If you follow the green lines, they're going back into inputs 5 and 6. I wanted to make sure that I used output 5 and 6 and input 5 and 6 for the same chain so you don't get confused. Okay, that's what I would recommend. You don't have to do it that way, but I would recommend that you do it that way. So 5, 6 out and 5, 6 in is my mix bus, my Neve, tape emulators, and my TC Audio SSL bus compressor. So you can see that here. Okay. The drum bus, if you look at the output in the red lines here, the output here, left and right, go to inputs 3 and 4. Why? Because I use outputs 3 and 4 on the last diagram to go to send, and the return is going to be 3 and 4. And that is the successor right here. Okay, hopefully you can see that on the video right here. That's the drum bus compressor. Now, the last thing I'll show you is output 3 here on the Neve, right? Output 3, this green line goes to input 3, or excuse me, output 3 goes back into input 2. On the Apollo, that is the Neve 1073 chain, right? So I used output 2 to go to the input of the Neve, and then I used return 2 to bring it back in, okay? So that's how you hook up physically your interface to your hardware. And again, I know it looks a little confusing. Once again, you can take a screenshot of this if you need it. Here's the output of the hardware back to the input of the interface. And I'll bring this diagram back up for you. the output of the interface to the input of the hardware. So if you need to pause the video and take a screenshot, that's how you do it. So it takes a little to wrap your head around, but once you get it, it actually is kind of easy, okay? So now once we've done the physical connections, let me show you in Studio One how this is routed. So we're back here in Studio One. This is just a session I'm working on a mix right now. I want to show you how the I/O is set up. So if we go into Preferences, and we go into Audio Setup or Song Setup here, here's my inputs and outputs on my interface. Okay, so here are the inputs. Return to Neve chain. You can name it whatever you want. I named it my Neve chain. My Neve chain is the 1073 into the EQ, into the compressor. Okay, that's on input 2. See over here, mic line, input 2. Okay, on my interface. Your interface will look different. But because on the diagrams I showed you, I use input 2, here it is. Now, return 3-4 is the successor. You can see that's line in 3, line in 4. It's a stereo bus compressor. And then 5-6 is the full mix, or the tape emulation and the bus compressor. Okay, so we have 3 sets of inputs: a mono input on line 2, a stereo input on 3-4, a stereo input on 5-6. These are inputs, these are returns, okay? On the output side, we have the same thing. Now on the outputs, I also have my main outs. Those are for my speakers that I showed you on the diagram. So here's output Neve chain, output 2, line 2, mono, output 3-4 for the successor, output 5-6 for the mix bus, or I call it the full mix. Okay, so once you have all your inputs and your outputs, and again, you can take screenshots of this. Here are the outputs. Okay, and here are the inputs. If you need to stop and take a screenshot, go ahead. Okay, so now once I've done all of that, down here in our console view, if you hit the input button, a lot of beginners don't realize in Studio One, if you hit the inputs, it shows you the inputs. So here is the line 2, line 3-4, line 5-6. Okay? Here are my inputs. And then if I hit the output button, you'll see on the far right-hand side here, I colored them in pink. Here are my outputs. Now, when you first do this in Studio One, you won't see it. It's always collapsed, and you have to kind of come over here with your mouse and you kind of drag it here. But you can see line 2, output, line 3-4, line 5-6. So the way this works is the mix is going out, these outputs going through the hardware and then coming back in on the inputs. And we'll see that in a second. Okay, so that's the second half of this. Okay, I'm gonna move this over here. Now, let me show you, now the way you used to have to do this before Pipeline XT, which is a great plugin by the way, is the way you would normally do this. For example, let's say you wanted to send your entire mix out 5-6, so I can go through my tape emulation and my bus compressor. So then what I would do is I would route all my buses down here, because I have a busing system for my whole mix. Right now they're going out the main, and I'll show you why, because we're using Pipeline. But normally you'd have to route this out 5-6. All the buses would go out 5-6. It would all go through my hardware here, right? And then it would come back in on 5-6, and you'd have to create what we call a print track, a stereo audio track, and you'd have to record the mix in real time onto that track. And if you go on my YouTube channel and you look up any of my old summing, analog summing videos, you'll see how that's done. That was before Pipeline. With Pipeline, you don't need to do that. Pipeline allows you to use your hardware kind of like a plugin. Or not kind of like, a plugin. So let me show you. So over here on our stereo bus, the first insert I have, you'll see is Pipeline XT. This is a stereo version of it. And you can actually take a picture for recall your settings. So if you need to recall stuff, you know the way it's been, the way it was set up, which is really handy, by the way. I'm not going to show you how to use all the inner workings of Pipeline. There's lots of videos on YouTube on how to do that, or maybe I'll do another video for that. I just want to show you the routing. But as you can see here, on the input side, we chose 5-6, okay? This is the first insert on my master bus, and then our return is 5-6. You can see that here, okay? So what does that mean? That means that all my buses, or all my tracks, if you weren't using a busing system, is going out to my main outputs. The first plugin I'm using is Pipeline XT. It's routing all the audio out of 5-6, going through my master bus hardware, right? The Neve tape emulation and the SSL bus compressor. and then coming back in on 5.6. Okay, so this uses just like a plugin. So if I play the audio back, and again, this is just the photo of it, but I think if you click on the photo, yeah, you'll see the, so let me just play a little bit of this back for you. Okay, and as you can see, as I play back the audio, you can see the hardware. Look at the hardware, you can see the signal, the LEDs coming in. Okay, so on Pipeline, you can adjust the input and you can the send and return levels if you want to. You can do that. Again, if I click on the photo, you can go back to the photo, and if I click on this, it blows it up full screen so I can see if I have to do a recall a month from now, I could see exactly how my hardware was set, really handy, and I can just hit close, okay? That's how you kind of set that up on Pipeline, and then from there, I'm going to my virtual mix rack, I'm going to another EQ, I'm going to a stereo widener, and I have a reference track plugin, but this is the first plugin in the chain. Think of this as just putting a regular old, let's say, bus compressor as your first plugin. That's what this is. So it acts just like a plugin. No need anymore to do a print track, which is very, very cool. So I like the way this is set up. This is really, really nice. Makes it really, really simple. And so far, it's worked really well for me. I haven't had any issues yet, but I'm still new to it. Okay, so that's on my master bus. On my drum bus here, you'll see that I have Pipeline stereo, and I have a picture of my successor. And if I click on that, it shows all my settings of how I have my drum bus compressor set up, okay? And once again, if I play back the audio, okay, and you can see on the needle on the drum bus compressor is moving. So again, it acts just like a plugin. Again, no reason to do a print track. Okay, very, very cool, very nice, very easy to work with. Now you can also see here, let me close this for a second, on the input channels, 3, 4, 5, and 6, when I play back the audio, look at the audio coming back in. So it's going out of Pipeline, coming back in, and then back into Pipeline, right? It's going out of Pipeline, through the hardware, back in. So if I hit play, here's 3, 4, and 5, 6. Okay? And then when you want to export your mix, you would do it just like you would any other thing, because everything is running through Pipeline. You don't have to worry about running a print track, as I said earlier, and recording it back into Studio One. So that is a basic synopsis, a summary of how I have the audio routed. Okay, it's pretty simple how I have everything connected. Now, because I only have 6 outputs on my audio interface, I've used them all now. So if I really wanted to add any more hardware to my rig, I have to now get a secondary interface of I/O and daisy chain it together with the Apollo to give me more outputs. So you got to remember, the more hardware you add to your rig, you have to have dedicated outputs to plug that hardware into. So if you're using stereo units, you have to have 2 outputs, left, right, right? So in my case, 3, 4, or 5, 6, you chew up 2 outputs. If you're using a mono chain, you're only chewing up 1. Now, what I didn't show you in this session is I don't have the Neve set up yet. I'll probably put Pipeline on the lead vocal bus, and I'll use my Neves for the lead vocal. I just haven't gotten to the lead vocal of this song yet. So that is how I set it all up. I hope this is helpful. Leave comments below and let me know if you have any questions or if you want me to show you any more detail. Hopefully this is a basic understanding on how to do this, and I'd love to hear from you. Let me know, do you use hardware? Are you doing hybrid mixing? Have you thought about it? I've done some videos over the last few weeks. You can look at my YouTube channel, look in the video history there. You'll see all the different videos I did, and a lot of people have commented and said since they've seen some of those videos, they're considering getting some hardware as well. If you have any questions, again, on how to hook this stuff up, leave some comments below, and I'd love to hear from you. So I want to thank you very much for watching till the end of the video. I want to give all my first-time viewers here over at Home Recording Made Easy, I want to give you a free gift to help you with your mixing. We're talking a lot about mixing on this channel these days. I want you to go to homerecordingmadeeasy.com. And I have 5 free, my top 5 tips to a professional sounding mix. You can download that little cheat sheet right at homerecordingmadeeasy.com, absolutely free. Check that out. And I also want to give you a coupon code. The coupon code is YouTube25. So if you want to pick up any of my courses on my website, and I have a lot of courses, especially if you're a Studio One user and you're new to Studio One, you can use the coupon code YouTube25 at checkout. It'll take 25% off any training course on my website. So until the next video, I've been Dave with homerecordingmadeeasy.com and mixingmadeeasy.net. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Take care, everybody.